Well, I think it shows that they're still a ways off, but I think it shows that they're in the same plan. They will take back bad contracts if it allows them to get young players and draft picks. They basically just got a guy that was a top 10 pick last year. They got picks, and they didn't give anything for it. So I love the Sam Hinkie process. I just talked about this on Twitter yesterday. I know people have criticized him. I know people say that it's brutal for the fans because they're not winning, but I think his way of collecting assets is very smart. It allows them to either find a star through the draft or to be able to have so many assets and with young players and draft picks that they could trade for a star later on. So I like the move. I like the Jahlil Okafor pick, and I like the trade last night. So I think it just kind of fits with the Hinkie's plan, and it seems like they're doing the same thing. They're going to be that team that's willing to take on contracts. They did get a few veteran players, so it may help them win a bit, but there's also the chance these guys get waived. You never know with Hinkie. Sometimes he brings in a guy, then they're only there for a few days, so we'll see.
Alex, it looks like, as you mentioned, he's collecting assets, and then I guess his plan is to find that star through the draft, take as many chances as you can at finding the star. They have 7 first-round picks over the next 3 years, so can they stockpile all these players together at some point? I mean, are you looking at, like, anarchy down the road at some point?
That's a great question. I think this is their way of trying to find multiple stars. They want to find that first star, obviously. They were hoping that maybe Nerlens Noel could be that guy, maybe Joel Embiid. Obviously, now Jahlil Okafor enters the mix. So they want one of those big men to emerge as a star, or maybe 2. And then, with how many picks they have down the road, they can try to find an additional star. I think they realize that this is one of the easiest ways to try to, build a roster that has multiple stars on it. Very few teams can do that unless you're a huge free agent destination or you already have stars in place that can attract others. It's very hard to go from 0 stars to multiple stars, but this is one of the ways of doing it. And I think Hinkie realizes that, and that if they're patient, this could all pay off for them. As you mentioned, they have so many picks over the next few years. Next year, if things work out for them, they could have 4 draft picks in the first 16 picks. I mean, that's how many picks we're talking about. But it does become interesting. What happens to the players? At what point do you have too many young guys and too many, top lottery prospects? Like you said, that's where it gets interesting. And that's where we could start to see him, put some of these guys together in trades. At some point, he has to try to start winning. You can't just keep doing this forever where you're stockpiling draft picks and, trading guys away and just drafting guys every single year. At some point, they're going to, try to make that turn and try to start winning. And at that point, I think that's where you start trying to draft for a need. That's where you start trying to, figure out which guys are part of your core. And at that point in time, that's when we could see if this plan really pays off and works out. But it is very interesting to see it all kind of come together. I think we haven't really seen anything like this in the NBA because no team has been able to acquire this many draft picks and kind of tank the way that they have. So it is very interesting. But with this trade last night too, they get the opportunity to swap picks with the Kings with 2 times in the future, and they get a future top 10 protected pick. So they just add to that stockpile of first-round picks. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all pans out over the next few years. It's so hard to grade what Hinkie's doing right now. It's one of those things that we're going to have to look at 5, 6, 7 years down the road to see if it worked out.
Yeah, Alex, I saw you tweet last night. You love the plan. You think more execs would do the same if their owner was patient and allow it until the NBA makes changes. It's brilliant. Do you think the NBA is annoyed by this? Are they watching this and saying, we don't like what the Sixers are doing?
Well, I think yes and no. I do think that other executives are constantly complaining to the NBA because they feel like, there hasn't really been a case like this where a team is just outright tanking. There have been teams that have tried to lose a few games here and there, and there have been some teams that tank, but this team is very open about it. The reason the fans have gotten behind this is because everyone knows what the Sixers are doing. It's not like they're being secretive about their plan. Everyone understands what's happening there. So I do think that other executives are complaining, and the NBA is hearing that a lot. They're obviously looking at changing the lottery. They don't want to incentivize this. And right now, the NBA's current model incentivizes tanking. If you lose a lot of games, you have a chance to land a star player. That's how it works. Obviously, it's not as bad as the NFL, where they don't even have a lottery system, but they haven't really run into that in the NFL yet. So I do think that Adam Silver has talked about possibly changing the lottery model so that there isn't that big incentive to try to tank. I think that's a possibility. He's mentioned that several times. And look, I do think that they want to avoid this happening to a lot of different teams. If it happens to one team, then that's one thing. But if you have, 10 franchises that are all trying to lose games, then of course that's bad for the NBA. That's bad for ticket sales, bad for TV ratings. So I do think that they want to avoid something like that happening where this trend catches on, because, we see this is a copycat league. If Sam Hinkie's plan works and they're able to get a bunch of star players by doing this, then suddenly owners do become more patient, and other executives can do this, and that's where you see a lot of teams around the NBA doing this. So I could see them getting annoyed and wanting to change some rules to prevent this from happening in the future, but I give Sam Hinkie and the Sixers credit for taking advantage of the situation now. They found these loopholes, and they see that the NBA doesn't have any rules blocking these things. So they took this plan, and it's really smart, in my opinion.
Took it to the extreme, too. And, it's interesting because you mentioned, Alex, about changing the lottery if they do this reform and change some things up. It's almost like Sam Hinkie said, well, if you do that, I'm going to get you there, too, because I can swap picks with you if somehow you jump up in front of me.
Exactly. It's smart. He's almost thinking ahead. It's becoming a chess match at this point to see, okay, if we don't have the lottery, what other ways can we try to acquire top picks? And like you said, that's where swapping picks becomes so valuable. So it is very interesting to see how teams would adapt. Basically, teams try to find the best way to build their team and try to find advantages. The NBA tries to respond and put some things in place, and then the executives are back to trying to go to the chessboard and see what they can do. So I think you're right. That's where swapping picks becomes very valuable, and other teams have done that as well. We've seen that in a number of trades recently where teams have gotten the ability to swap picks, and I think that is with a possible wheel situation. That's what we've heard about with the lottery, that they could have a wheel that every year a different team gets a top pick. We've heard stuff like that. So that's where those kind of trades do become very interesting, where you can swap picks.
Alex, the interesting thing about this, I was thinking about this last night, a lot of times when a team, like Brett Brown, he's coaching this team, he looks like a good coach. He's getting everything out of teams that just aren't good enough, and you worry about the coach leaving. I was thinking, what happens with this team is actually successful? Is Hinkie going to want to be a GM of a team that he's not rebuilding? Like, is he going to be a patient? Once the thing is finished, does he sit there and just enjoy that, or is that not his personality?
Well, that's a good question. We always hear in the NBA that there are certain kinds of coaches and executives that, there are rebuilding coaches or there are rebuilding executives. And then there's, championship level executives and championship level coaches. But I think Hinkie wants to see this whole thing through. I think he wants to go through all of these tough years and build the team up and then enjoy when they're a contender. And he was, he's been an executive for a long time. He's highly respected. With the Houston Rockets, he played a huge role in a lot of their different moves under Daryl Morey. He was very, significant in their front office there and influential there. I think the reason he went down this road and started this plan is because Houston, for a long time, saw how hard it was to acquire a star player. Before they got James Harden, they were trying year after year to acquire a star, and they couldn't do it. And then at the same time, they were finishing with around the 7th or 8th seed in the playoffs, so they didn't get a top pick either. So Hinkie wanted to avoid all of that, and that's what he does with this plan. But I do think that he's going to want to stick around and watch his players develop. And I think if his players do well and they do start winning, then certainly he'll have plenty of job security, so he'll be able to stick around. I can't see him jumping to another situation where he could, build a franchise up again. I'm sure he'll have a lot of offers, because if this plan works, then he'll be highly coveted by other teams that are rebuilding in the NBA's basement. But I think he could stick with the Sixers and watch his players thrive. And Brett Brown, I think he could be the coach of the future, too. When he came in, he knew what the plan was going to be. Hinkie made that very clear to him that he'd have to be patient. He would get a lot of losses on his record, which most coaches don't want to do. But that's why they gave him a long-term deal. They believe, he could be the guy who coaches this team into the playoffs in the future. It makes them very successful. He was another guy that was very highly respected. He was with the Spurs for a long time. So I think both of these guys could be around for quite a while.
Alex Kennedy's with us here. He's the managing editor of Basketball Insiders in the NBA. Obviously, a lot of things happening. But, Alex, we've talked so much about Hinkie and the process. Can you kind of give us your thoughts on the trade, the particulars in the deal? Nick Stauskas is coming here, Jason Thompson. Carl Landry. What did you think of the guys the Sixers got back and how they'll fit in?
Well, I think Stauskas is the most interesting one. He's a guy that still has a lot of potential, and I think he's most interesting because he fits into Philadelphia's young core, and he's an excellent shooter. There were people around the NBA that felt like the Kings did not use him correctly, so it's going to be interesting to see how the Sixers used him, but he's a very good shooter. Last year he was the number 8 pick in the draft, so clearly, he was a highly coveted guy. He did very well during the pre-draft process last year, and he played well in college too, so they basically bought low on a guy that could be very good. He's still very young, so teams already are writing him off, and people have called him a bust. But I think it's way too early to do that. So he could end up being a contributor for the Sixers, and certainly he'll have an opportunity to play there. Carl Landry, I think he's excellent in this trade because he's a great locker room guy, great veteran guy. He's been on winning teams where he's been a huge contributor. He was excellent for the Warriors a few years ago, and he helped them go from being a losing team to a playoff team. He was kind of part of their, revitalization along with Jarrett Jack. He played a bench role there and was a key member of that team. But then also with the Sacramento Kings team, he was a leader and a mentor for a lot of these young guys. And I think he'll have that same role in Philadelphia. And then Jason Thompson, he's an average big man, but, he's a contributor. He plays hard. He's going to fit in with the culture there. He definitely works hard. And then the best thing, I love the picks and the ability to swap picks. So I think the trade, it's a huge win for the Sixers, in my opinion.
Well, I got you, Alex. Let's look at a couple quick things. LaMarcus Aldridge canceled a meeting with the Knicks, maybe Miami. Everybody thought the Spurs would be a slam dunk. What is he kind of waiting on?
Well, I think he just wants to make sure that, no other team jumps out. Miami's now trying to get involved. He wants a second meeting with the Lakers because their first meeting, they basically focused on off-court opportunities and the ability to play in Los Angeles and what that means for his brand and all of that. But he wanted to focus more on, the on-court stuff. So the Lakers are getting a second meeting so they can kind of clear things up and show how they can be a contending team. That's going to be pretty hard to do because their roster has a lot of holes, but he's going to give them some more time. Apparently, he's going to be meeting with several other teams as well. He canceled the meeting with the Knicks, but I think he's going to try to meet with the Spurs and the Suns again. The Suns are interesting because they just added Tyson Chandler, and that's the exact kind of player that LaMarcus wants to play alongside. So he's giving them a ton of consideration right now. But I do think the Spurs are still the front runner. They're the best chance for him to win. And this is a guy that wants to win a title. That's what he's focused on. Some guys go into free agency wanting to get the most money. Some guys want to play in a huge market. For LaMarcus, it seems like he just wants that ring. So I think the Spurs are still the front runner here.
We saw Monta Ellis go with the Pacers. A lot of the reason this deal was made so that the Kings could go after an Ellis or a Wes Matthews. Are the Kings going to be at the altar with nobody there to marry?
That's a great question. There are a few guys that they're still pursuing. They're talking to Wes Matthews. They're talking to Rajon Rondo, talking to Patrick Beverley. They're looking at guards right now. Basically, they want to put some playmakers around DeMarcus Cousins to make him happy. They just drafted a big man in Willie Cauley-Stein, so they're trying to add to their backcourt. It's going to be interesting. I think they felt like they had Monta Ellis. And like you said, that's why that trade was made. So I think they were disappointed to see Ellis go to Indiana. But I think now they're definitely zeroing in on Wes Matthews, and they're going to give him a huge deal, a huge offer. But that's pretty risky. He had an Achilles injury, and there have been a lot of players that have not been able to come back from that and be the same player. So it's a risky move, but it could be a high-reward move because when healthy, Wes Matthews is very talented.
I do believe we saw that in Philly when they signed Elton Brand to a big deal coming off Achilles with the Clippers out there. Alex Kennedy, Basketball Insider, so much more on the NBA. It has been a wild 48 hours since free agency opened. Trades galore, and I'm sure more to come. And you can check out Alex Kennedy NBA on Twitter. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks a lot. Take care.